Today I want to show you how I created this conceptual piece where I made this balloon look way bigger. When you want to pull off an effect like this, you need to pay special attention to the perspective and the direction of the light. In my case, the direction of the light wasn't a problem because I took the picture of the balloon right after I took the self-portrait, so the light matches perfectly. I really recommend you create this way. If you have an object you want to shoot with, you should bring it with you, then the light and the ambience will match perfectly. And the perspective, in my case, for this concept, I needed the balloon to be really up in the sky, so I shot with my camera down below and the balloon a little bit up. This isn't exactly a tutorial, but I want to show you my PSD file so you can see exactly what I did, and that might help you to create something like that if you want to. So let's go to Photoshop and I'll show you all the layers. I created this image back in 2017, and sometimes I divided my workflow into two different PSD files. I don't do that now because I can see the point of it. This is the background, and sometimes I take several photos of the background so I can blend all those together in post, and as a result I have a bigger image. So the first thing I did was to use the brush tool and a white color to illuminate myself. I just changed the blending mode to overlay and just painted in some areas. This is how it looked before and then after. Then I noticed that these green tones are too saturated and I don't like that. So I started using adjustment layers. This is a selective color adjustment layer. What I did here to change the tones was to play with the greens and the yellows. I took a lot of the yellows off and then play around with this and the greens to achieve this tone. I did it again, but this time using a layer mask to make the background a bit lighter, and I also did something similar with the trees back there. There are many ways to do this, but this time I chose to use also a selective color, and obviously since this is lighter, your eyes are going to be directed to the more contrasted part of the image, and right now that's the subject, and that's great. Now let's see what I did here. And actually this is a funny thing about this image, is that I was in a farm and I didn't have that much experience being in a place like that. I spent 3 days there just to take pictures, and while I was looking for a place to shoot, it was a bit hard because I couldn't find a place like this with green grass and a space to create this idea. When I finally did, I had to pass this fence and I completely ruined my pants. So I obviously needed to correct this, and that's what I did here. Now, my idea back then was to make everything orange, including my shirt. So I used a hue and saturation adjustment layer to change the tone of my shirt. And then I gave myself a lot of contrast, again to direct the viewer's eye directly to me. And then I changed again the greens. I don't know why I did it like this. And here with levels I made the blacks in the background even more lighter. And you do that changing this to the right. And now that I have all the background and the subject is very visible and the background is not taking all the attention, then I think we can start to play with the balloon. And here's the image I used. Actually, I even put it exactly on the same place I was intending to add it in post-production. Here you can see. And as I explained earlier, I needed to make the perspective match. That's why I put the camera below the balloon, and that's all we need to make an idea like this realistic. One thing that I think it's very common is to try to make the objects look a little bit more 3D. I mean, I made a little bit of contrast on myself to make myself pop a bit more, and basically that's what I needed to do with the balloon. I needed to enhance the brightness and make shadows a bit harder maybe to achieve that 3D look. And here I use the brush to make it a bit lighter and give it a bit of texture, and I could have done this with an adjustment layer of hue and saturation, but I just painted it. I just used the brush to paint it orange. And basically I just gave it a bit of texture and color, shadows, and of course the main image doesn't have that, but I think that if I have a bigger balloon, then the light isn't going to enter as easily as with a tiny one. So that's why I made some shadows. Here I made something interesting with this layer. So I did the same thing I did to myself, and I just used a new layer and I started drawing or painting exactly where I needed to. You can see here the before and after. And here I used the last adjustment layers. I was trying to see what I liked. And when I used this brightness and contrast layer, I noticed that I really liked the yellow original tone. So I desaturated with another adjustment layer of hue and saturation. And then I ended giving more contrast and a bit of brightness. Here you can see the mask that I used. But now we need to connect our subject with this big object. We need a rope. I couldn't find something that I thought it would work, so I just decided to paint it myself. As you can see, this isn't perfect, and that's fine, because imagine if you grab the brush tool and let's use gray, and you just paint with your mouse or your tablet like a really hard line, and maybe you make a really straight line and it doesn't look very real. So what I did was to first use a very small brush, and then again and again, because obviously I couldn't do this just at the first try, I painted this rope. Now you're probably wondering why I have so many layers if there's only one rope. If you have an object, if you're watching an object and that object has a strong source of light behind it, then your eyes won't be able to see more than just a silhouette, and maybe you won't see the colors of that object, and that object might be white, but you won't see that, you only see black. And that's kind of what happens, or what I think should happen if there was a rope there. In the places that the rope has the sky behind it, I left the original dark color. But in the places where the rope is in front of the balloon, then the rope should be lighter. And that's what I did. That's why I have this, and this layer. I simply used the lasso tool, this one here, and imagine this is just one layer, and I just started selecting where I wanted to cut. Then I pressed layer via cut, and I just gave a color overlay a bit brighter and a tiny, almost invisible drop shadow, because probably that's something that it should have. So now let's go to the second PSD file, and there's not much left to do. So when I changed the dimension of the picture, I noticed that the balloon wasn't very balanced, at least to my eyes. So what I did was to change the position of the balloon. And of course, this didn't match, so I changed it too. Now here you'll see a lot of adjustment layers again, and there's something I do want to explain here. This obviously depends on your taste, but in my case, I think the balloon with this yellowish orange tone and the orange shirt are not as interesting as if I had contrasting or complementary colors. And I played around till I find something that I visually liked. So what I did was to use contrasting colors, and I changed this orange to pink or maybe purple. And then I gave more contrast to the balloon and changed it to yellow. And then added some blues to the sky because I completely erased all that in the previous edit. And that's it. This is the final image, and here you'll see this was the before and this is the after. This was the before and this is the after. I really hope that by seeing my PSD file and the way I took the pictures that I use might help you to create something like this. Maybe not using a balloon, you can find some objects that you already own, and by making them bigger you can find a really conceptual piece, In my case, I wanted to express that even in cloudy days, you can find or you can bring your own sun and bring positive vibes to your day and attitude. I hope you like this video, and I'm sure I'll see you very soon.